Hey y'all, finally back. This is Glasses with Glasses, and this is my review for George Orwell's Animal Farm. So, I'm really glad to actually do this review because this was a really interesting book to read. I promise you, this review will not be long like the first one that I did for 1984. The book was a lot shorter, but it was quite interesting, and this book actually made me think a lot about what actually could be. It was a quick, easy to read book, about 140 pages. So, depending on how fast of a reader are, you really could do this in like a day if you wanted it to, if you wanted to. But unlike 1984, this book is not dark. While it does carry a lot of the same themes throughout, um, it does. The read is not as dark. Um, it's like not as dark in tone, and also when you're just kind of like picturing it in your mind. I don't know if you do that when you read, but I do. You don't see, or I didn't see like a lot of bleakness in it. So it's really about the short and the short matter of it is that this book is really about animals that overtake a farm, or as it is called, I think, what is it? The Farm Manor, I believe. I could be wrong, y'all. I apologize if that was the original name. Um, the Manor Farm, that was the original name. So they decide to form a rebellion against the owner. His name is Mr. Jones. He is consistently intoxicated, and he just treats the animals like animals. And one of the animals from the beginning, his name is, they called him Old Major. He was a boar, who was, at the time, at the beginning of the book, he was 12 years old. So he decides that he, that there was a problem, and that he believed that there would be a rebellion that would be held up by the animals, and that all animals should stick together, and always see, just remember, hey, we are all equal. As long as you have four legs, we're all going to remain together. Even the birds, they counted their wings as having four legs. That was how they kind of made them feel. How they kind of made them feel, grouped in, like they were part of, like the horses and all the other animals that generally have four legs. And so they were like, hey, this is the only way that we're really going to, be able to take care of ourselves, is that we have to do this. The humans don't have our best interests. They're sending us to the slaughterhouse. They're not really feeding us the way that we should be, blah, 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 X, Y, and Z. We're producing all of this food for them, the chickens with the eggs, and, the animals and all the other stuff, and they're taking it. They're taking the milk that we produce, the eggs, and all this other type of stuff, right? There wasn't any benefit from it. So Old Major passes away, and the other animals decide, at some point, they form this rebellion against Mr. Jones, and they're able to overtake the farm. It actually happened a lot quicker than what they thought it was going to take. And what you start to see, actually very early on, um, is that you start to see, um, uh, how they're setting things up, and what animals, in the hierarchy of the animals. Um, so it is, so from the very beginning, they really try to they really try to, I would say for a short period of time in this book, they really try to keep up as they have it, like these seven commandments, um, which they have for the animals. And the seven commandments are, what is it? Whatever goes up on two legs is an enemy. What goes up on four legs or has wings is a friend. No animal shall wear clothes. No animal shall sleep in a bed. No animal shall drink alcohol. No animal shall kill any other animal, and all animals are equal. Those are the seven commandments. So for a short period of time, they actually do try and, abide by those commandments. And they also try and establish literacy amongst all of the animals so that they can read, or at least have like some type of comprehension amongst them all. And this really is kind of like done by a horse name, I mean, not a horse, but by a pig whose name is Snowball, right? He's really kind of like taking the lead on a lot of this stuff. However, there is another horse. His name is Napoleon, and they are always consistently like at odds. Even though they are both pigs. Did I say Napoleon was a horse? I'm sorry, a pig. Even though they are both pigs, Napoleon is always in opposition to what it is that Snowball is trying to do. And so this big thing breaks out where the humans from there are two other farms which are on each side of Animal Farm, which is now the new name. And the men that own those farms, along with Mr. Jones, they try and come back and try and take back the farm. That does not work. Also during that time, Snowball is also he is expelled from the farm, even though he was the one that really tried to, he kind of like led the charge in making sure that the animals maintained, they maintained the farm, and that the humans didn't come back, or that Mr. Jones did not come back and take over the farm. They had managed to do a good job. All the animals were happy, blah, 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 and they wanted it to stay that way. Then there was, so Snowball continues, so everybody is really happy with what it is that they did. And Snowball then decides that they need to build a windmill, simply for, what is it? Because for like electricity. And mind you, before all of this, it has been clearly established that the pigs are the only animals that are able to read and write. They pretty much are, they are the smartest animals on the farm. You have the horses, which are, they're kind of smart, but they can't really remember a lot of the alphabets, a lot of the letters in the alphabet, and then it kind of like goes from there on. I think pretty much like the sheep are at the bottom, where they just are kind of like the stupidest, if that's what you really want to, if that's how you want to categorize them. So at some point, Snowball's idea of building this windmill comes in opposition with Napoleon, who thinks that this is a horrible idea, and and um, and so they bump heads, and they end up getting away to get Snowball run off of the farm, or expelled off of the farm. And from here, Napoleon takes charge. I think the name Napoleon is actually is actually an interesting name, and actually it just this kind of like just crossed my mind, is because when you think of Napoleon, obviously, you have the Napoleon, the French military guy, and this is what, although Napoleon is a pig, he's not French. You understand? Like, that name is just associated with somebody who was in the military, and this is exactly what Napoleon does. Napoleon goes from. This is when things really start to shift drastically. You start to see the militaristic ways of which things change. Um, People are called, well, I'm not going to say people because it's not people. Just like in 1984, the animals speak to one another, or they address one another, saying comrade, which is very interesting because just like in 1984, it is a very, the word comrade is not a friendly word. It's almost like it 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 almost is kind of like there's this thing of separation, between you and that person. It's not a very friendly term. Somebody that you would consider to be your friend, you wouldn't call them comrade. And that is kind of a little bit of the feeling that you get in this book, but not so much. But definitely between Napoleon and the other animals. Again, like I said, there is a clear hierarchy, which is there. The pigs have completely taken over. There is a pig named Squealer who Napoleon uses. He is a great talker. And he is he's very convincing in his speech when he speaks to the other animals. So all of the things that Napoleon tells him, he is able to go, he tells to Squealer, and Squealer goes and is able to convince the other animals, even if they may have some reservations about what it is exactly that is taking place. A clear example being every Sunday they would have a meeting where there would be room for, where all the animals would be involved, and they would kind of like have a little debate. They can go back and forth and everybody would be heard. This was not happening anymore. Napoleon was now up on a slight platform above all the other animals, with other pigs, and she also had some dogs which acted as her bodyguard. And really, this was the division between her and the other animals. Very much like a class, like you have the higher class of animals and then you have the lower class of animals. And so throughout the book, there also was just, you see that the pig started to do things that in the Seven Commandments were clearly forbidden. Also, there's deceit, which goes on, which becomes a theme throughout the book. Lies of which are told. Things that were said in the beginning are then they are saying that it wasn't true, or they've also changed the seven commandments, and they really use this to their benefit against the other animals that really weren't as, that were either not as literate as the pigs, or just completely illiterate, or just some just like really stupid. They just kind of followed whatever it is that was told to them, and they did it without asking any questions. um, the pigs really use this to their advantage, um, and and they went from Napoleon, along with the other pigs, went from living in the barn with the other animals to moving actually into the farmhouse. Um, and they then began to, sleep in the bed, or, and then they were doing all types of things of which they said that they would never do, right? And so it's very, very interesting to read this book, um, because you're like, wow. And I know at times during this, I felt a little bad. It is a little weird that you would actually feel bad for animals or whatever it is. But I think I kind of felt a little bad for some of them, because it made me think about, these are things that actually happen. Just think about it as a person, in your daily lives or whatever it is. How many people get taken advantage of by other people because of maybe lack of education, or even like at your job, at work, there is a clear dividing line between who was at the top and who was at the bottom, and sometimes at jobs you may be fortunate enough to have them where, yes, there is a clear dividing line, but everybody still feels good. And at other places, sometimes you have bosses or superiors that are totally assholes, you know? So that was the one thing that I thought was, that really kind of like kept my attention as I was reading this book. Um, and then also, by the end of the book, the animals had the pigs had completely, completely taken over. They had, and not only that, but Napoleon had managed to, like, really, he was what, 24 years old, I think, at this time. A lot of the other animals had either died. There were new, younger animals which had been born onto the farm. Some of them didn't even know about the rebellion or whatever it is. But Napoleon had completely taken over, and was now actually fully engaging with humans on at other farms, and was making plans with them about how to actually run the farm and what they were going to do. And um and they had even, and I think the most shocking part for me throughout this book, especially at the end, was when some of the pigs had, or when the pigs had actually come out of the farmhouse. I think they had either came from out of the farmhouse or maybe like behind the farmhouse, and they were literally walking on two legs. And I was sitting up there thinking to myself, that would freak me the heck out. like, like if I actually saw that in real life, where I went onto a farm and I saw pigs actually walking on two legs upright like humans, I don't even know how I would feel about that. Like, it's really weird. Um, so, but they really had kind of like almost gone from animal to human by the end of the book. And the last scene, which is set in this book, is Napoleon and some of the pigs are, like I said, with the owners of the farms, which are on each side of them. and the pigs are also now engaging in alcohol. They're drinking beer with the human owners, and they're laughing and all this other type of stuff. And Napoleon makes a quick little speech letting them know, that the pigs are the owners forever of of the farm. And some of the other animals are, they're outside looking in this window, and Napoleon and the other pigs and the two humans, they can't see. They're not actually paying attention to the animals that are looking at them from the outside. And it says, I actually book is, oh, here it is. But this is something that I thought was very interesting, and this is like the last thing that it says. And it says 12 voices were shouting in anger, and they were all alike. No question now what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which is which. I think that was very interesting, because that right there sums up everything. Just reading that book, that things had changed so extreme. Things had changed so much that the pigs were no longer just literate. They no longer were making decisions. They no longer were just sleeping in the farmhouse. They were no longer just walking on two legs, or even just wearing human clothes, or overseeing the other animals while they worked hard with barely any food to eat, despite the fact that the farm was actually very prosperous. And the pigs and the dogs and stuff, they were always healthy. They never went hungry or had hungry nights or anything like that. But they really have become, the pigs themselves have actually become indistinguishable between were they actually human or were they animal. And that really was it about this book, or that was just kind of like my quick review of this book. Again, like I said, I really liked this book. There were a lot of themes, which, like I said, that were kind of the same throughout. Also, reading 1984 just didn't really have kind of like that dark cloud, or it wasn't as dark in tone, I felt, as 1984, but it was still really good, and I think you could still kind of see it. I would highly recommend reading this book if you haven't, or if you have. Please, please, please comment below. I really would like to know, did you think that my review was spot on? Did you think that I missed anything? Or what exactly were your opinions of this book? So, yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad this video was actually under 30 minutes, which is what I was striving for. So my apologies if I was talking very fast or something like that, but I really did not want to bore you guys with basically telling you everything that happened in this book, because it really wasn't necessary. So please like, subscribe, and comment to this review, and thank you so much. Oh, also, if you did not see my pre-review, this is my next book that I will be reading. It is called The Mistake by K.L. Slater. This was also in my book collection. However, I don't think that I read it before, but we are finally getting away from George Orwell. So I promise you, no more militaristic style books, none of that, none of that. We're going to get away from that for a little bit, okay? I think 2 is enough for right now. We're going to try and get into, something else. So thank you so much again. And I look forward to, to doing another video for you guys, and to reading your comments. Bye.